How do you get information about generally about how economy is doing? From the economists, from the news. And they tell you things like the economy is up by 2%. The economy is down by 5%. 5 is huge. Well, by 1%, you know. Inflation is up by 7%. Things like that. But this is not how you really understand what is going on, because the economists, they give you the big picture, okay? And in order to understand what the real situation, what's going on the ground, so to speak, I always look at the small details. I look at the news and I analyze and I pick the things that I find important. And many small things put together is like a puzzle. You know, looking at one small thing, you don't understand much. Another, third, fourth. But if you put 100 of them together, then you start seeing the big picture. And I would like to, for the first time, I'd like to give you a bunch of small pieces of puzzle of Russian economy today. Well, I hope it goes well. I hope you find it interesting. I hope that everything is understood and simple. Without further ado, I'll jump into what I have prepared for you. Howdy, everyone. My name is Konstantin. Welcome to Inside Russia, giving you the updates, the news, my takes, my opinions on what's going on in Russia. Usual Russia explained by the unusual Russian. And without further ado, let's jump into the Russian economy news, insights, indicators. Call them whatever you want. I'll start with this. In Russia, the credit card portfolio has increased by 2.2 million in the third quarter, reaching 45.2 million units, credit cards. Such an increase turned out to be the record for over the past 10 years. This is a small economic indicator, but to me it's huge. It shows that right now, it's the time where most Russians for the past 10 years taking out credit cards. Credit card is a really bad debt, okay, because you end up paying 5-6 times more interest on a credit card than if you take a personal loan or a specific loan, such as a car loan, or, you know, like a loan for something. I recommend everyone to abstain from taking credit cards out. It's okay to have one for emergency, no question. If it's okay to use one if you pay out your balance every single month, that's okay. But if you have this loan for the long-term credit card loan, then that's not okay. And it shows that Russians are focusing into the very, very worst debt possible, credit cards. But the credit cards are easy to obtain because in Russia, credit card interest rates currently are around 30-35%. Yes, I know, holy be Jesus. I know. And then this is just incredible. How many Russians are, this is like the last resort for them. You know what? They just want to eat. That's why they're taking out credit cards. Moving on. A shortage of personnel is observed at the production facilities in St. Petersburg and St. Petersburg province. As a result, the employers have increased the hiring of migrants, foreigners, says Victoria Nesterova, general director of a large company called Isotherm. I quote, "I think that all employers will say that there are no people, the shortage of people, no workers, no designers, no manufacturing experts, no IT specialists. We are already attracting specialists through specialized organizations from Central Asian countries, such as Uzbekistan," Nesterova said. Well, I understand what Victoria Nesterova means very well, because every single morning I go to have breakfast and I have 100 people, 150 people in my breakfast club, Russian-Ukrainian breakfast club. where Russians and Ukrainians show up every morning. Not all 150 of them, but, 10, 15 people every morning. And over 3 months, I've seen exactly the people that Victoria and Esther were talking about. Workers, well, I didn't see many workers, but I saw designers, I saw manufacturing experts, I saw IT specialists, and the likes. Plenty. They all are here in Uzbekistan because they don't want to be part of what Russia is doing to Ukraine. So there you have it. Moving on. News coming from Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan is a country very close ally of Russia that borders Russia in the south, southeast, and Kazakhstan is a large country, and lots of Russians have fled to Kazakhstan over the last 3 months. And the news coming from Kazakhstan, from migration, the Committee of Migration Services, the immigration agency of Kazakhstan, in September 22. From September 21st to September 30th. Now, listen to this. From September 21st to September 30th. I remind you, 21st of September, Vladimir Putin announced there's a mobilization in Russia, and Russians just started exiting Russia en masse. So from September 21st to September 30th, 406,000 Russians, Russian males mostly, entered the country. 406,000 Russian males. I don't know what to say. That's a little over 1 week, one country. Imagine the magnitude, the scale of Russians leaving Russia. Moving on. Over 2 waves of emigration from Russia this year. 100,000, over 100,000 IT specialists left and did not return over these 2 waves, said the head of Ministry of Digital Technologies, Maksud Shadayev. And again, I am seeing many of those IT specialists here in Tashkent, Uzbekistan. They have come here, they're staying, they're working, some working for the Russian companies remotely, some quit the Russian work and working someplace like for some other companies, they can work worldwide. And yes, Maksud Shadayev is right. Most of them left, and many of them do not plan on returning to Russia ever. And moving on, again, Maksud Shadayev, the head of Digital Technologies Ministry. He says that the share of computers and servers with Russian processors on the market is now less than 3%. It means that the share of computers and servers with foreign processors, semiconductor, is 97%. Honestly, I didn't even know that there's such a thing as the Russian processors. I guess there are. 3%, well, imagine what happens when Russia finally is cut entirely from the supply of semiconductor, from the processors, from computers, servers. So I guess 3% of Russian technology companies or whatever services will continue working, and 97 will be shut down. Moving on. The quality of mobile communications in Russia may deteriorate after the departure of Nokia and Ericsson, warned Reuters. According to some experts, the network coverage area may return to the state of the late 90s. Back to the USSR. I really don't understand people who want to go back to the USSR. Somehow they find this idea sexy right now. But what are they going to say when they wake up one day and their cell phones don't work and you have to go outside to a certain spot just to get the signal, to get email or something like that, and email don't work because there are no Russian servers? When you go to get some bread and food and you stay in line for 1 hour when you have a kid and he's sick and you cannot get medicine, is that kind of future they want for themselves? I don't understand. Moving on, the losses of Roscosmos, Russian space agency, by the end of 21 amounted to 31 billion rubles. The projected losses by the end of 2022 right now will be more than 50 billion rubles, Roscosmos CEO Yuri Borisov said. Official information coming from the Russian government. That's Roscosmos, Yuri Borisov is the new CEO. There is a very strange information to me. Because first of all, they were selling us the idea that Roscosmos, the Russian space agency, is number one. And it was a year ago, in the last year, with a different CEO, he was saying, we're the best. We're on the cutting edge. We're going to go to Mars. We're going to go to Moon. We're going to go everywhere. We're flying, And all of a sudden, now they're telling us that last year, while that guy was telling us all that fluffy stuff, the losses were 31 billion rubles. What the fudge? And now the losses are more than 50 billion rubles. Well, wait a second. Our commander-in-chief, Almighty Vladimir Putin, back on April 12th, told us, officially, publicly told us that Russia is launching its moon program, and Russia's going to go to the moon. Moon program? 50 billion rubles loss? What the? I was like, the hell is going on? Moving on. Russian oil exports fell by 54% in the first week of the price ceiling, Bloomberg says. Well, I'll remind you, on December 6th, the Russian oil price ceiling was enacted by most Western countries, meaning that Russia can only sell oil less than certain price. Otherwise, if it's selling higher than certain price, than $60 per barrel, then insurance companies cannot insure vessels to transport Russian oil, and the vessels will be put under sanctions. The companies who transport will be hit by sanctions. So as soon as this price ceiling was enacted, Russian oil exports fell by 54%. And my friends, this is a disaster for Russia, because Russia is getting so much money from the exports of oil. Incredible. The agency considers maintenance of the oil terminal on the Baltic Sea to be one of the reasons, but supplies have also decreased from other ports, especially in the Far East. Now, Far East is kind of a free remaining zone for Russian oil exporters, because lots of companies, less control. It's much easier to control in the Baltics than in the Pacific. But then the exports also fell in the Far East. Bad sign. This is one of those indicators to watch in the future. Moving on. World's largest shipping company from China refused to carry Russian oil. Since December 5th, the company has stopped transporting oil from the Far Eastern port of Kozmino, from where the ESPO variety was sent along. That's a variety of Russian Far East oil, was being sent along a short route to India and China. So, no more oil to India and China. The fleet of China COSCO shipping company has more than 1.4 thousand vessels. Carriers refuse to carry Russian Far Eastern oil. That's why exports fell by 54%. So they refuse to carry Russian Far Eastern oil, which is traded above the price ceiling. It costs little more than $60 per barrel, unlike the main Urals export brand, the cost of which has gone below $50 mark. It's just a huge problem for Russian economy in general. Not just Russian oil companies, but you see, the pillar of Russian economy is oil and gas companies. They sell oil and gas, and that amounts to almost 50% of Russian budget revenue. So they take a huge hit. Russian budget takes a huge hit. Moving on. Russian metallurgical companies cannot sell 30 million tons of steel. And this is huge, because steel is and metals in general is the third pillar of Russian economy. European sanctions, which cut off a metallurgical company from key sales market, left millions of tons of steel unclaimed and put manufacturers under threat of production cuts and mass layoffs. Surprise, surprise, that's what I've been talking about all 10 months, At the moment, and I'm quoting Alexander Shokhin, the head of Russian Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs, at the moment, there's nowhere to put 30 million tons of steel products in Russia. The domestic market can absorb 3 million. Where is the rest going? To the warehouses? What are we going to do with people? Cut the jobs? Mass layoffs? Good question, Mr. Shokhin, but you know what? You should have been asking this question before, okay? Because we all saw where it was going. Well, better late than never. Moving on. 33% of Russians have started eating less meat, fish, and other animal products over the past year. That's according to the NAFI Analytical Center. When I go to supermarket, myself personally, I, buy different stuff. You know what's most expensive stuff? Meat, fish, and animal products, such as cheese, milk and stuff like that. And by looking at this number, and I believe it because I saw it in the supermarkets when I was in Russia. You can see in my videos, people didn't buy much stuff and it's becoming worse. This number means that every third Russian started feeling the pinch so much that he or she started saving on food. This is pretty sad, but it's very expected. Moving on. 759,000 Moskovites cannot leave Russia because of debts. Yep. Bailiffs issued 759,000 orders banning Moskovites. That's just not Russians, just people in Moscow, the residents of Moscow, banning Moskovites from leaving Russia by December 1st. The bailiffs of the Russian Federation issue resolutions on temporary restrictions on travel abroad when the amount of alimony debt child support debt exceeds 10,000 rubles, $200, and for other payments such as taxes, and such failed bank loans, 30,000 rubles, $500. There is a law in Russia that if you owe, you cannot leave the country. I mean, we can argue with the fairness of this law, but it exists. It has existed a long time ago. Russians know about that. And it's just one thing. You'd better not have debts that other people cannot collect. Otherwise, one of the punishments is they're not going to put you to jail, but you won't be able to leave Russia. And this is what is happening now. 759,000 Moskovites alone cannot leave the country. In the Navy, yes, you can sail the seven seas in the Navy. Yes, you can put your mind at ease in the Navy. Come on now, people, make a stand in the Navy. In the Navy. Well, the Moskovites, you're going to the Navy soon. You're going to make your stand. Or perhaps to the Army. 759,000 of you. Moving on, 22% of Russians plan to work in the upcoming New Year holidays. The number of such people has increased 8.2 times over the year, 280% over the year. VCIOM survey data says. To me, it might seem a small indicator to you. To me, this is huge. This is absolutely huge because I know very well Russian culture. I know how Russians they just absolutely love taking 2 weeks off and going on vacations to warm countries. From December, people usually stop working around December 26th, 27th, and they fly to Egypt, Turkey, Thailand, Vietnam, Dubai, you name it, anywhere where it's warm. That was in the past when we had so much money to spare. we just entire like 20% of Russia just emptied, and Russians would fly to vacate some places. But then harder times came, but Russians stopped flying out to the warm countries, but they started taking vacations inside Russia. For example, people from provinces started driving to Moscow, showing families around Moscow, the Kremlin, the Red Square, and so forth. But still, they took vacations. They did not work. Even if they couldn't afford going some places, they just sat in front of their TV sets, watching the New Year movies, eating Olivier salads and stuff like that. That's until last year. This year, 2.8 times of Russians are working the holidays. And I understand them very well. They just want to make money and to feed their families. It means times are so hard for them that they forfeiting the holidays and they're saying, screw it, we're going to go and work. This is huge. Moving on. In large Russian cities, rental prices have dropped by 21%. In St. Petersburg, prices for renting one-room apartment decreased by 14%. In Kazan, by 6%. In Krasnoyarsk, by 3%. In Moscow, the prices fell by 21%, which is a record indicator. The decrease in the cost of renting housing is linked to the fact that, on one hand, a large number of apartments of Russians who left the country have appeared on the market, have been placed for sale and for rent. And on the other hand, due to the crisis of high inflation, tenants are looking for cheaper options. Basically, there is so much more supply and there's so much less demand. Plain and simple. I agree with this data. I think this is right, and this is hugely important because people around me, especially families who have left Russia, and then some of them left permanently, but they didn't sell their properties in Russia. They're trying to rent out, have like extra income to pay for the housing here in Uzbekistan. Some can, some can't, it depends. But they try to do that, a lot of them. And it just shows, but the real estate market is landsliding. Moving on. The total salary arrears delays in Russia as of December 1st, 2022 amounted to 1.029 billion rubles, over 1 billion rubles. Follows, that's Rosstat, Russian Statistical Agency data. In November, the total debt increased by 145.3 million rubles, or by 16%. You see what's going on here is, in Russia, people work, but they don't get paid sometimes. Something happens to their employers, they can't pay them on time, or they can't pay them at all. They file for bankruptcy. And Russian Statistics Agency monitors this number, and this number is growing. Month by month, it's growing. It's a direct indicator of what's going to the Russian economy, Russian business. The companies are increasingly under financial pressure. Not all of them are bad and they just don't pay salary to. That's severe punishment if you don't pay salary. You can land yourself a prison term, And they're not doing it because they just don't want to pay salaries, but because they can't. And this just speaks volume on the current state of Russian economy in December of 2022. Moving on. That's a funny news. Russian computer equipment manufacturers, notebook manufacturers, declared a multiple increase in fakes of domestic brands. For example, company IRU computers and laptops and Graviton servers. So basically, Russian companies who are knocking off Western companies such as Dell, Lenovo, and the likes start complaining because other Russian companies knocking off these knock-off companies. This is insane. Pardon me. Moving on. Well, this is a pretty sad, tragic, and just not good news. State Duma is a Russian parliament. The Russian parliament deputy Nikolai Brikin, in his Telegram channel, announced that he was going to initiate a law on the recognition of all Russians who left after the start of mobilization, foreign agents. This is a direct hit to human rights. I don't know if you can hit even more human rights in Russia, but this guy is jumping over other people's heads, Basically what he's saying is whoever left after the 21st of September, or perhaps even after 24th of February, whoever left Russia and is residing outside of Russia is going to automatically become a foreign agent. I mean, folks, there are so many good people here in Uzbekistan. I am actually very proud to call some people friends, new friends. I am very proud to come every morning to meet them for breakfast. My pleasure and my honor. And my country is doing such tremendous atrocity to them and to me and to them. For what? For us wanting to leave Russia and reside someplace else? They want to cut off our rights. They don't want us to make money in Russia. They don't want us to, they put draconian control measures upon us, limitations in our rights. For what? For us leaving Russia, so they cannot get to us. They cannot just reach out and grab and say, hey, get over here, and then put us to prison for that. This is sad. I'm not going to comment this anymore, but this is very sad. To me, it breaks my heart. They can't get us here, but that's just the fact they're trying to do that in Russia is just incredible. Moving on. This is also tragic. The government has published a decree recommending that doctors of other specialties be hired as anesthesiologists and surgeons after completing retraining courses that take anywhere from 3.5 to 9 months. So if you're a doctor, say pediatrician or whatever, you can become a surgeon in 3.5 months. They put you to courses, they show you how to cut people and how to sew them, and that's it. To me, small news, not to me. It's huge. It shows the sad state, the catastrophe in the medical field. It shows how there's a great shortage of surgeons. And you know what? No wonder, because I have met 7 doctors, 2 families, and 3 people just came here by themselves. And 3 of them are surgeons. 1 is neurosurgeon and 2 are regular surgeons. And guess what? They were welcomed by open arms by the medical professionals here in Uzbekistan. They were given jobs. They were working, a couple working as surgeons, and one is, I don't know, having some kind of medical doctor work. And Uzbek doctors, they don't understand. They know how many efforts and how much time is put into training of surgeons, and they go "Is Russians crazy?" They're just pushing out their doctors, their surgeons. What are they doing? Who's going to perform surgeries? And this is exactly what this thing is all about. There are so few surgeons. They need so many more that they're going to retrain. And it's going to take from 100 to 180 days. To 140. From 100 to 240 days. This is crazy. Moving on. Putin signed a decree on retaliatory measures to impose a ceiling on Russian oil prices. The supply of Russian oil and petroleum products to foreign legal entities, companies, and individuals is prohibited, provided that the contracts for the supplies provide for the introduction of the price ceiling. Basically, whoever goes along with the price ceiling and forces Russian companies to sell oil less than 60%, $60 per barrel, the Russian government forbids to do business with. Well, good luck, Mr. Gorsky. Well, good luck, Mr. Putin. Such a useless measure, and just good luck with that. That's a good one. Moving on. The prices of Moskvich. You know, this is actually good news. There's a brand new car in Russia. It's called Moskvich. Moskvich used to be a huge factory owned by Renault Nissan in Moscow, and they were producing good cars. Inexpensive, good quality, very good cars. Renault, Logans, Renault something. They left Russia. They forfeited their business. They sold it for $1, for €1. They lost. They wrote off over 3.5 billion euros in loss in Russia, but they decided they didn't want to do anything with Russia anymore. Well, the Chinese moved in, and Russians started making the new Russian cars called Moskvich. Moskvich is nothing but a car manufactured in China by a Chinese manufacturer called JAC, Jack. And Moskvich is GAC GS4 model. Basically, what happens is they manufacture this car in China. They take off wheels. They ship it in a container to Moscow. And they take the wheels and screw it on. And they put name Moskvich 3E on this model. And it becomes a Russian car. Okay? Genius. Okay. This is a fantastic, fantastic idea. New Russian production. So, in the past, they announced the prices for this new Moskvich Russian car. And the prices were announced 1.97 million rubles per car, which is a lot of money, almost, $35,000 or something like that. Dealers reported that a complete set with a variator, it means automatic transmission, costs right now from anywhere from 2.35 million rubles, much higher than it was announced before. And an electric Moskvich costs 3.5 million rubles. And these are only the recommended retail prices, excluding dealer surcharges, dealer payments. And by the way, the price of the original JAC GS4 model that's manufactured in China is 614,000 rubles. So they take that car, they ship it here to Russia, they don't do anything with it, and they sell it 4 times more expensive. Wow. I don't know what to say. No comments. Russians are actually eating this. I think they will be buying Moskvich. Well, good luck, my friends. Moving on. Whoa. First Deputy Prime Minister of Russian Federation, Andrei Belousov, the heavyweight guy, says the next year will be quite tough for Russia from the point of view of finances and budget deficit. Plain and simple. The guy is geniusly short. Okay. Again, next year will be quite tough for Russia from the point of view of finances and budget deficit. In plain and simple language, it means Russians, you know what? You didn't really live well in the past, and you shouldn't even start thinking about that because it's going to get worse. That's the official Russian official of the highest caliber speaking. Moving on. Finance Minister himself, Anton Siluanov, not heavyweight, but juggernaut of Russian government, one of the pillars of the Russian government, says that the twofold increase in the federal budget deficit, twofold increase from 0.9% to 2%, that's more than twofold, by the way, of GDP was due to additional expenses. Related to social payments to families with children. Well, I have family with quite a few children. I didn't receive any payments from the government, no increase. I didn't receive any payments for that matter. But so, due to additional expenses related to social payments to families with children, and listen to this. This is important. And other required segments of the population. Who might be those? Other required segments of the population. Perhaps those who get social payments from the government for the loved ones who died. Some other countries. Of course, that's secret information. All he says is the other required segments of the population. But we're not stupid. We understand. So imagine that 1.1% of GDP has gone to the payments of those families of the fallen. Imagine how many fallen. You can do math, putting 2 and 2 together. This is a very scary number. Moving on. 22,000 Russian citizens received permanent residency and work permit in Kazakhstan in 2022. Minister of Labor and Social Protection Tamara Duisenova speaking, the Kazakh official. 22,000 have claimed that they want to live in Kazakhstan forever. 22,000. Over 400,000 people flew to Uzbekistan in just 10 days, under 10 days. And more and more start staying. This procedure of getting permanent residency takes time, takes about 3 months in Kazakhstan. I know that 3 of my friends are applying for the permit right now. And we're going to see the tenfold increase. There are going to be over 200,000 Russians who will be applying for the permanent residency and work permit in Kazakhstan. You'll see. That's Russia's loss. That's Kazakhstan's gain. Moving on. The Ministry of Defense has proposed to raise salaries of directors of military enterprises. Wonderful. Now, according to the current order of the Ministry of Defense, the salary of heads of enterprises, the directors, cannot exceed the salary of an ordinary employee by 5 times. Ministry of Defense proposes to increase this ratio to 8 times. Don't ask us. Hey, just go ahead and spend our money because the military enterprises coming out of the budget, taxpayers' money. Just knock yourself out. 8 times. Make it 10 times, No big deal. Moving on. In 2022, the amount of alcohol consumed by Russians increased. Beer consumption increased by 8%, wine by 6%, vodka by 8%. This data comes from the Center for the Research of Federal Regional Alcohol Markets. That's a industry organization. Well, small indicator? No, not small, huge. Because it shows that Russians started drinking more. Not because they have become happier. Perhaps they just want to forget the reality. They want to somehow take off the stress of these terrible events that are happening. This is bad. That's going to affect Russia for a long, long time. Moving on. In November, the consumer basket collected from 67 names of medicines that Russians most often buy. Yes, the industry of pharmaceutical companies, they keep track of this basket. So this basket of 67 names of medicines that Russians most often buy rose in price by 29.4% year-on-year-to-year basis. experts of the Romir Research Holding calculated. You know what it means? Plain and simple. Real inflation. 29.4%. Real inflation. Food and medicine. This is it. Moving on. Russian mobile operators have warned customers about the increase in prices for communications in 2023. It's coming. The reason that they call the increase in equipment costs. According to the experts, the cost of tariffs may increase by 25-30%. Again, this is a real inflation indicator, 25-30%. This is what I'm hearing over and over again. Food prices by 25 to 30%. Pharmaceutical medicines, most often bought medicines by 30%. Tariffs on mobile communication by 30%, internet by 30%. This is the real inflation in the year of 2022. Moving on. Russian airlines transported a total of 88 million passengers in 11 months of 2022, according to the closed statistics of the Federal Air Transport Agency. This is 14.8 million fewer people that flew in the same period of last year. 14.8 million fewer people. This is a real indicator of how Russian economy is doing. People fly less, they have less need to fly, and they have less money to fly. They prefer to drive, they prefer to take trains to save money. And there are probably not too many reasons to fly to them anymore. Moving on. Over the past 5 years, the number of personal subsidiary farms has decreased by 362,500 units. In other words, 362,000 families stopped participating in agriculture production. 362,000 farms, small farms, medium-sized farms, have been lost. No comments. Since January 1st, 2023, Ukraine has announced that it's raising tariffs for the transportation of Russian oil via a Druzhba oil pipeline that goes through Ukraine. Yes, it's crazy enough, right? Russia is at war with Ukraine, and there's still Russian oil is going through Ukraine through the Druzhba pipeline. So Ukraine, starting in a few days, Ukraine is raising the tariffs by 18.3%. I guess everything is going according to the plan. Thank you, Mr. Vladimir Putin. Thank you. Great plan. You're the great planner. What can I say? Moving on. Turkey refused transporting 86% of Russian oil after the introduction of a price ceiling and a ban on tanker insurance. We discussed this before. The exports of Russian oils fell, and Turkey has played a major role because it's basically cut Russian exports in the south. So the major routes, south, north, and the west. The west has been cut by the Chinese. The north has been cut by the maintenance of seaport, and the south has been cut by the Turks. Nice. Everything's going according to the plan. Nice plan, Mr. Vladimir Putin. In December, the country received only 2 shipments of Russian oil. And we're talking about, pardon me. So in December, the country, Turkey, received only 2 shipments of Russian oil with volume of 1.7 million barrels. Experts believe that the refusal may be temporary. Local refineries buy Urals at a huge discount of up to $30 per barrel and will look for ways to circumvent the sanctions. Everything is going according to the plan. Woohoo! Great plan we have. Moving on. The Armenian authorities should do everything to ensure that Russians who have moved into and are working in Armenia will stay in the republic for as long as possible, preferably permanent, said Economy Minister Vahan Kerobyan, Armenian Economy Minister. Armenians, thank you. You are smart people. You are full of common sense. The same I heard twice at least from Uzbek President Mirziyoyev. He said, those Russians who have come to Uzbekistan, he was addressing to his officials, make sure you do everything that they stay in our country. Keep the IT specialists. Give them free work permits. Give them, preferred housing. Just do everything that they stay. So that's two countries, Armenia and Uzbekistan. And you know what? Thank you. Because our country has chewed us up and spit us out. And you somehow are helping us. Thank you so very much. Moving on. Russians have become leaders in buying apartments in Turkey. The first place among foreigners who purchased residential real estate in Turkey was taken by Russians. They accounted to 13.9 thousand lots, apartments, houses. Russians fleeing Russia, and they're trying to settle in other countries. We're all witnessing a huge wave of Russian immigration, history in the making. The exodus. Moving on. Kazakhstan will not impose sanctions against Russia. Kazakhstan. But it will also not help it circumvent Western sanctions, said Foreign Minister of the Republic Mukhtar Tlyuberdi. That's a blow to Russia because Kazakhstan's supposed to be one of the closest allies, if not the closest ally. And when the sanctions were announced, Russians were saying, with bravado, saying, we will just, instead of getting everything directly to Russia, we'll just get everything through Kazakhstan. And now Kazakhstan says, forget about that. So that's a blow. Moving on. In Russia, the cost of housing and the communal services was increased twice in 2022. The authorities promised not to do this again until at least mid-2024. Talking about low inflation, under control, that's a real indicator of how things going, utility bills going up twice in a year, and utility payments, the rates are controlled by the Russian government, and it increases them. So that's the real low inflation for you. Moving on. That's a funny one. New Year's tours in Russia have risen in price by 34% to 61,000 rubles. And that's domestic tours. The foreign tours, on average, rose in price by 40% to 2.2 thousand rubles. Well, obviously, it's much cheaper to travel within Russia than going abroad to the countries like Thailand, Turkey, Egypt. But I don't understand this. I understand the price increase by 40% because you have to pay in dollars or in euro for the tours abroad. But in Russia, it's domestic. It's paid in Russian rubles. How come everything's rose by 34%? How come the patriots have been telling me, the Russian ruble is very strong. It's going like the dollar is going up, the exchange rate. The Russian ruble is going up. The dollar is down. It means that the Russian tours must fall in price. Instead, they're up by 34%. My friends, always look at the real indicators, not the bullshit that you are tried to be given, okay? Just think, use your brain. This is a real indicator. 34% up This is what the inflation, this is what the exchange rate of Russian ruble, its strength. This is the real purchasing power of Russian ruble. Moving on. The Federation Council approves, not the Soviet Federation. Soviet Federation is the higher chamber of Russian parliament, approved the law with amending the tax code of the Russian Federation on the additional withdrawal of 19 billion rubles from Alrosa. That's the company who extracts diamonds and sells them in 2023. So basically, Russian government says, we're going to take extra 19 billion rubles from you in taxes, and that's a federal law. And you can't say anything about it. You can't do anything about it. That's highway robbery, in other words. Moving on. Exchange prices for gas in Europe have been declining for the 6th day in a row today. Following the results of Friday's trading, the prices dropped by 7.4% below $940 per 1,000 cubic meters. We've been told so many times over the summer, hey, Europeans gonna freeze. The prices will go up by, this huge amount to like $5,000 per cubic meter, and they've been dropping. And this is end of December. Always trust Russian government. It's very trustworthy. Moving on. That's an interesting indicator. You know what happens when the economy is doing well? Car thefts they're going down. Because people make money in a legal way. They don't need to steal cars. But when things go sour, the car theft goes up. And this is the statistics for this past 11 months of the year. Car theft in Russia have been growing by 25% monthly since October. Автострахование agency says monthly by 25% rising. Hyundai ranks first among the brands of stolen cars. Santa Fe, Creta, Palisade, Sonata, Tucson, Solaris. Also this year, Kia Sorento and Kia Sportage figure in the top 10. The list also includes Japanese Mitsubishi Outlander, Lexus RX, and Toyota Camry. Real indicator of how economy is doing. Car theft. Moving on. This is a pretty sad news. The Russian authorities should pay increased attention to Russians who have left the country, including after the start of the special military operation. This is stated in the annual report on the Provision Commission of the Soviet Federation, Russian Parliament Upper Chamber, for the protection of state sovereignty and prevention of interference in internal affairs in Russia. According to the senators, the citizens who have left are in the zone of obvious risk in the condition of campaign launched by the special services of NATO countries to recruit foreign agents. Now, I am, according to the senators, respected senators, almighty senators, I am among higher risk of being recruited by NATO special foreign agents, spies, or whatever. What can I say? It's pretty embarrassing. Again, there are so many good people around me. We're just trying to survive. We're very confused. We're lost. We've lost our future. We're trying to make new one. Everything that we have had done in Russia has been canceled, nullified. And the Russian government is trying to just finish us off. Our own government, our own people. Fudge them. Moving on. During the first 9 months of 2022, 119,000 Tajik citizens received Russian passports. This is reported by Tajik Radio with reference to the statistics of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Russia. Basically, this is just not important news, but it's huge. It seems not important, really huge. They're trying to make the loss of Russians up by giving Russian passports to everyone. Tajiks, Uzbeks, Kazakh, anyone who wants to claim Russian passport, come and get it. Basically, that's what the policy right now. Tells volumes. Moving on. Natural gas production in Russia by the end of 2022 will be decreased by up to 20% to 671 billion cubic meters, said Russian Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak. Very sad news for Russian economy. If it was up to me, I would be making this heard by every single Russian, because they gotta think. Their well-being comes from selling oil and gas. And one of the top government guys says, you know what? Not a big deal, but by the end of the year, the gas production will be decreased by 20%. Production, not sales, production. Okay, sales take hit even more, but production, not only not selling anything, they're not producing, they're not extracting gas any longer, you see. This just speaks volumes. Another heavyweight speaking up. So-called turn of Russia to the east has practically no alternative. As a result, the ties with Europe built over 50 years, the economic connections are collapsing, and the country is losing markets for importing equipment and exporting energy, timber, fertilizers, said Mikhail Zadornov, chairman of the board of one of Russia's largest banks, Открытие, Open Bank, and he used to be the Minister of Finance of Russian Federation. So he's a heavyweight. So basically, in plain and simple language, he says this: whatever the politicians have been saying, oh, Russia is turning to the east, because it has no alternatives. It must somehow sell to someone, and that the east is the only one remaining area that somehow buys something from Russia. And basically, he's saying that by losing our economic connections with Europe, we are fudged. Moving on, Russian stocks show the worst results in the world in 2022, according to Bloomberg. The Bloomberg calls the fall of Russian RTS index the strongest and the biggest among the 92 indexes that the Bloomberg tracks. The Moscow Stock Exchange index may decrease by 44% by the end of the year. This is the maximum after the 2008 crisis. Kind of strange, you know. I hear this, and I also hear everything is going according to the plan, and I'm thinking, what kind of hellish plan is that? What is this plan for Russia? Holy moly! This is one hell of a plan. And the last news, finally. And it's also a very real-life indicator for me and for other families. Well, not really for me, because I'm not in Russia anymore, but millions, hundreds of millions of the Russian families, Russian people. Last year, a family of 4 people paid an average of 7,000 rubles to get enough food to furnish a holiday feast for New Year celebration. 7,000 rubles. A little over $100, $120. And Rostov gives the data, and I agree with that. That's a true data, because I furnished the table last year. Moreover, I made a video about that. You can go and watch the video. it was like a prophecy, because I was thinking about, and I was talking about Uzbekistan, how I was remembering Uzbekistan in that video. And in a few months, I landed in Uzbekistan. It's crazy. But anyway, 7,000 rubles. You get meat, fish, alcohol, everything. And you celebrate the new year. This year, a little more than 10,000 rubles. That's what's going to cost to furnish a table. 30% more. Roughly 30% more. That is the real life inflation indicator. This is what Russians are feeling right now. Their salaries have not gone up. Many have lost their jobs. Many have started making less. And prices of this very basic things such as food have gone up. This is the true state of Russian economy as of today, December 28th of 2022. And this has been my message. I tried to do something different today. I hope you liked it and found it interesting.